next section is why does humanity turn into inhumanity? If we look at this particular graph, and I promise you this is the only graph, that this is the collective harmony and balance, and this is informational handling capacity. So as you increase in informational handling capacity, there's more collective harmony and balance. So you have 2 instruments and go to 50 instruments, or 2 voices and go to 50 voices, 100 voices. That basically, this shows that it just increases. So the collective harmony and balance goes up as the informational handling capacity. So your little finger has some informational handling capacity that regulates the arm, and the body has more, and then what regulates the brain, and then the social things have more complexity, so you just handle information in a whole different way. So this is what we would expect from nature. This is exactly what we expect. That from our bodies, that's what we would expect. And this is what would be sort of natural functioning. However, what happens is that it starts to bend down, that as the informational handling capacity increases, we're starting to lose harmony and balance. So here you have a little increase in a choir from 2 people to 50 people, and you have more collective harmony and balance, and it has a much greater effect upon your net of existence. And large people working together, there's an energy, there's a power, there's a beauty that comes with that. However, once we get to a certain point, and this is sort of the informational handling capacity that the human being has, that if you increase it, then you get a decrease in collective harmony and balance. Okay? So the stone man had a club. Yeah, there's a little bit. He couldn't get around a lot. But when you have spears, when you have horses, when you have weapons, and as we develop more and more complicated weapons and have more information handling capacity, that we have more. So this is sort of a curve that represents sort of more of our biological stuff, and then we, rather than continue to go up in harmony and balance, as most of us pointed out, by just opening our eyes and ears, reading the newspaper, listening to anything. So this is the curve that we're interested in. So how come? So mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of all? That when non-focused on a task, your thoughts automatically converge on you to form an I-centered reality in the representational world. It's a big deal. That basically, when we're not doing a task, what is it? We're thinking about shopping. You're saying, oh, I'm thinking about my family. No. You're always in the middle. It's your family. You see. It's your task. Basically, the mind works with convergent thinking and divergent thinking, okay? we're really emphasizing divergent thinking, or excuse me, convergent thinking, because in convergent thinking, that it focuses on meaning. Divergent thinking, it just goes anywhere, you see? Yes, we have some divergent thinking, but convergent thinking, converging on meaning, is the way our mind is wired to work. Someone who randomly puts out thoughts, although they're not random, but they have no meaning, we think they may be psychotic, schizophrenic. So our mind loves to have meaning. So convergent thinking in dualistic mind functioning, and we'll get into that, but in dualistic mind functioning, focuses on meaning and it focuses on me. You ever wonder why there's so many selfies? It's not. It has to do with how the convergent thinking which the net creates for you. So let's see how this story works. Okay. So your brain helps you focus on you. That there's a part of the brain with a default mode network. And this network is if this was a brain or an orange and you cut it in half, the default mode network is located on the inside part. The cortex is what we call the executive network. That's where your executive network is. I'll get into this more in detail, but if you cut on the inner part of each hemisphere, there exists this default mode network. And if they put you in a scanner and do an MRI and you're not doing anything, they have initially thought that was a default setting of your mind. But what it involves in is that whenever this default mode network is lit up, that there is always self-centered thoughts, self-referential thoughts. And remember, this is a part of the brain that has 60 to 80% of the blood flow, okay? This is a mighty powerful hombre that creates and is in the brain when we have self-centered thoughts. So if you're in a scanner, it lights up these networks. For instance, you don't have to remember this, but there's the precuneus, the posterior cingulate gyrus, and then there's the medial prefrontal cortex. We keep thinking that the prefrontal cortex is always, executive functioning. Well, on the outside it is, but on the medial portion of the prefrontal cortex is located what? Part of the default mode network. So you don't need to remember any of this. I'm just saying that there's a fantastic amount of brain science that has to do with the default mode network. There's tens of thousands of papers. So here, the nose, this is where your nose is. This is the outside of the brain. This is the cut surface. And this is where sort of the default mode network is lit up. So over here, the nose is here. This is the outside of the cortex. This is sort of the executive part, and this is the cut part. So basically, they just they keep track of where the networks are when you're in the scanner. And functional MRIs meaning you're having an MRI and you have a computer there. So they might show you a picture of a scary picture, or they may show you a picture of you running, or they may concentrate, but when this default mode network is lit up, then you make mistakes, there's mental lapses, and so forth. So when you're task-oriented, it's the executive network, and they have a reciprocal relationship, meaning when one is high, the other is low. So 24/7, either your default mode network, your self-centered thoughts are there, or you're doing a task. It's one or the other, every moment, every human being. So, next. Okay, so let's move on from the neuroscience to these self-centered thoughts. The self-centered thoughts is what? To give us a sense of identity, okay? Identity comes from the Latin root meaning sameness. So basically, if this net generates existence each moment, that we need to have a big part of our brain that's going to provide some sort of continuity, okay? And this is where 60 to 80% of the blood flow is. So the purpose of these self-centered thoughts is to give us a sense of identity. And we now get to what is interesting to most of us here, and that is the identity system. The identity system, or we call it the I system, is the underlying mechanism that drives identity. The I system function is to create and maintain a separate, unchanging, and self-sufficient identity. Separate, unchanging, self-sufficient. What do you think that does as far as the relationship to your net of existence? Okay? What does it do? It disrupts the connection. It disrupts your experiencing and expressing your connection. You're always connected to the net. You can't get away from the net any more than you can get away from being present in this particular moment. So the task is, by the 60 to 80% of the energy of your brain, and here we're spending 5% listening, sitting, talking, is to create a separate, unchanging, and self-sufficient identity. That's and you see it's going against the harmony and balance of the net. So it really has, its mission is almost to oppose the way your net of existence works. So how does this identity system work? And tomorrow we'll get into a lot of this, so those of us who are familiar with mind-body bridging, it'll be very, very clear. Those of you who are not, it'll become more clear tomorrow. But it does so by manufacturing requirements of how you should be and the world should be every moment. So this part of the brain, relationship to the mind, generates a thought of how you and the world should be. And it does so by putting requirements that others should respect me, should make mistakes, life should be easier, my spouse should be more understanding. So basically, the I system works by just creating these sound bites of how you and the world should be. And whenever these sound bites are violated, you know, you have a flat tire, your coworker doesn't do a job, your client harms himself, your kids smoke dope, whatever, that basically, if it violates a requirement, it sort of triggers off the identity system. So, a quick summary, the I system manufactures requirements each moment to create an identity. So your identity is not only dependent upon this body, but the identity is composed of the whole universe. So what will happen in politics in Washington, you know, affects you. So the identity isn't just who I am, but encompasses values, encompasses everything in this representational world, and we'll get into that in a bit. So when a requirement is violated, the depressant fixer are activated. So when requirements are violated, you feel a whole bunch of negativity, negative thoughts, unpleasant body sensation, and then there's another, the fixer's activated. The depressor and fixer are really subsystems of the I system that we'll get into a little bit today, but tomorrow, those of us who know nothing about mind-body bridging, it'll become quite clear. So as I said, the depressor generates negative thoughts, and the fixer tries to repair it. And the key, here's the key is the storylines. The mind works with thoughts. So these storylines keep the depressor and fixer going, but these same stories are working to create your identity. So who you think you are is a bunch of stories in the representational world, because we all know that who we are is so vast, so boundless, so ever-changing, that you can't put it in a box. Yeah? So what is new about this model that we're developing is that these storylines created by the depressor and fixer of the I system influence a representational world. And this representational world generates requirements. So before we have this model of existence, all we would say is at each moment the I system generates requirements. Now we're seeing just how these requirements are generated. Where do they come from? Okay? And we're saying that the requirements come from the representational world, and the representational world is a self, object, and everything else. So, to give you a little example, consider the next time you see a person who lied to you. Okay? Say you have a friend who lied to you or talked behind your back. You know, when you met that friend before he did that, you know, you were relaxed, comfortable. Your representational world was fine. There was you, there was he, there was basically natural functioning. So say you found out that he lied to you, talked behind your back, soiled your reputation, spoiled things for work or your relationship with loved ones. So the next time you meet him, what's going to happen? So once you hear about this, there's all sorts of storyline. Why did he do this? How could she do this? What in the world was he or she thinking? And then there's all sorts of other, and this alters the representations of the self, yourself, and that particular person, okay? So there's these stable representations of who you are, who that person is, but then there's all these auras that are generated by the I system that, in a sense, that when you meet this person, then there's a requirement he should apologize. Okay? And when the person doesn't apologize, then you become more furious, become more hurt. How come he doesn't apologize? Why? So you get the whole depressant, fixer, and storylines. So if we just look at a situation, for those of you who don't know a lot about mind-body bridging, but it seems to be the way the mind works. The key is a representational world, okay? And the representational world is influenced by storylines, and that distorts reality. And not that you wouldn't have an expectation. If you have a natural expectation, the person shouldn't lie to you. I think we all would have that expectation. But the identity system captures this natural expectation, makes it a demand, creates body tension, creates dysfunction, and separates ourselves from the net. So if we take the experience of a child, a family member, that they do something, they break some of the rules of the house or whatever, that if your I system is active, what would your parenting ability be? That basically you're disconnected from the net, you're not executive functioning, you're having functioning, which we call I system functioning. So the question is, what is your state? What is your ability? If you're connected to the net, and the I system automatically disconnects you, so you're lacking empathy, long-term decision-making, and basically you get angry, you make mistakes, you're not using your full cortex. So this is it. This is what that I system loop looks like. So you have a generation of requirements, the requirement is violated, you get the depressor, you get all these storylines, you get the fixer, it impairs your functioning 100% of the time that your functioning when your I system is on is impaired, and it causes a dysfunctional mind-body state. It's a mind-body spiritual state. It's the state when you're experiencing and expressing the totality of who you are. That's what the identity system does. It prevents you from experiencing your true self. Okay? So this dysfunctional, the tension that you feel when the identity system is on is not the tension that you would feel before going onto a football field, or before speaking in public, or before a fireman going into a fire. That the tension you feel, for instance, in your gut, you see. And it's interesting that I'm not going to do any experiential exercises, which is the heart of MBB, but we're looking at the essence of the model. So, how your gut works is peristalsis. So this part of the bowel contracts and this expands, okay? The food moves through. This contracts and this expands. That when the I system is on, this contracts, and you have a pain in your gut, okay? There is a mind-body dysfunction. There's a mind-body disharmony each and every time that when the identity system is on. Okay. Is there any question about this particular I system loop? Those who know about mind-body bridging, this is old hat. What is new is that the storylines create the generation of requirements. So what happens in the brain, okay? We're now shifting back into the brain, and I don't want to go over neuroscience here, but basically in the brain, this default mode network creates a disharmony. So basically the representational world is all messed up with storylines, and this default mode network is connected to this particular salience network. So basically, the salience network, when you have a requirement, it puts out a demand as if a baby is crying, as if you have pain. So this is how it captures. It loads, these work together to load that it's the most important thing is to fulfill these requirements. Okay? So the way the brain works is that basically it creates a disharmony, that it becomes lopsided, it becomes imbalanced, that it ceases to be able to experience the harmony and balance of all these things working together. So if you look at domestic violence perpetrators, that basically they don't see what's out there. They don't hear what's out there. They distort the reality. So the reality becomes colored by their particular storylines. And the brain network that has 80% of the blood flow then becomes in charge. So what's in charge is not the whole gestalt, but what's in charge is this default mode network, and it distorts a whole psychosocial thing. So do we have any questions about that this is sort of the brain science that shows how eye system functioning is so powerful that it can not experience and express the connection of your true self, the essence of who you are.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask more about the representational world, and it sounds like a lot of our brain energy goes to that. And when you were explaining why we develop that, it sounds like it's for safety, like for bonding, for safety, for survival. So it's a natural system that we have. Can you say more about what its goal is? Or
yes, well,
why?
the representational world allows us to be who we are. It allows us to navigate the world. It allows us to picture how we're connected to the net of existence. So the representational world is natural functioning. That basically it's natural functioning, but it becomes hijacked by this eye system. So the eye system uses a representational world. So basically, if you look at yourself and a loved one, that basically when you get misunderstandings, that there's little auras going on that's saying, hey, why doesn't he do this? Why didn't she do this? And then it affects one, it distorts reality, the reality that comes from the net. There is reality that the person may have done something, but the key is how you're going to respond to it each moment. So the representational world is absolutely crucial, and when the eye system is resting, the representational world is a pretty good picture of objective reality. So basically, I don't bump into this, that I have, pictures of how you were kind and interested in here, or disinterested and want to go someplace else. But all of that is dependent upon the 60 to 80%. It's basically what comes in is just a trickle of information. through your eyes and ears. But basically, the whole key is what's going on in this 60 to 80% of the brain and how your mind works with that. Because we're not talking necessarily about brain. I go to the brain to show how how the mind is materialized. But okay?
And the identity system is also something that we all have naturally to create meaning and continuity.
Yes, the identity system, every human being has the identity system, okay? Animals, vegetables, it doesn't have an identity system. Everything that's naturally functioning does not have an identity system. We have an identity system because we have free choice. We can go up or down. If we didn't have an identity system, we'd all be angels, you see? Yeah, I'm just doing God's will. I mean, it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
But we're human beings. So we're given the blessing of going north or south. We're given the blessing of doing good or doing evil. We're given the blessing of being connected to our net of existence, the pervading animating principle, or we can never be disconnected from this net of existence. All we can do is what the identity system does, is prevent us from experiencing and expressing that connection. So all human beings have an I system or identity system. And yes, natural functioning, we need to have a concept of who we are, a picture of everything, so all that. It's just that the identity system, it's humongous system. It's the biggest system in the universe, because if you look at how powerful a system must be to challenge, to oppose this net, to oppose all the scriptures and the like, that it must be a pretty powerful system, and it must continue 24/7. So basically, it's the most powerful system aside from natural functioning, because it must be very powerful. Because if it rests, what's going to happen? If the identity system rests, you're automatically connected. You don't have to reach to get it. You're already connected to the net, and the identity system is a veil, is a hindrance that prevents you from experiencing and expressing that connection. So that's what the identity system does. The identity system is a blessing that humankind has. Cats don't have it, dogs don't have it, trees don't have it. But we have that because we have the intelligence, the informational handling capacity to be able to materialize what's there. So that's sort of a nutshell of the identity system, that you don't get rid of it because it's a compass, okay? That when your identity system is on, you're going in the wrong direction. So it's like this bird that flies south in the winter and then flies north. Say it's in Mexico and wants to come to where we are in Seattle. That basically, that's a long ways to have a map in this little birdie's brain. But it's flying, and if it goes a little off course, it feels tension. Okay, it's in a sense, it's a guidance system. So basically, the identity system is going to cause you, if you're not aware of it, to misfunction, to impair your functioning, to impair your relationships, impair your self-esteem. And if you're aware of it, then it's just a guide that you're off course. So basically, it's sort of a compass which we're supplied with. So we don't try to get rid of the identity system, but we just try to befriend it, just become aware of it. And our awareness is so powerful that, it's like some of the tool, you come to your senses, and your awareness and your natural functioning is already there.
Thank you.
I think we had another question.
You might have just answered the question. I was wondering, is the goal to turn off the identity system to connect, or is it to learn to manage the stream of expectations?
Yes, the identity system is just to, we call it, befriend the identity system. What does that mean? It's to see how it works. What is it telling us? What is it doing for us? What is the purpose? How does it fit in with who we are? And then, you know, the natural functioning will then flow more and more. And we will get into this process of how the mind works when the identity system is resting more and more. What exactly is happening in our mind as you continue to rest your identity system, or as you continue to use MBB practices, or if you pursue your spiritual practices? What is it that happens? And we're going to be able to get into that in minute detail so we can see, when you come to your senses, your identity system rests. But there's much, much more to it, because a moment later, your identity system may be active. So what it has to do with is a process of purification of this representational world. But we'll get into that a little bit later, purifying it from all these storylines and everything. Okay, well let's, so I shift back to the neuroscience. And here are two nodes of the default mode network. So here you have a person in a scanner, and they have a lot of self-centered thoughts. So they are able to analyze. And I was in a MRI lab at University of Michigan, spent 6 months there. Carol and I were in Michigan. And these are very meticulous studies that you do a study for an hour, but to analyze the data may take 6 months. And they have certain rigorous standards, as Bill knows, if you're publishing papers about functional MRIs. So these two nodes are sort of almost talking with one another. This is the anterior node, and this is sort of a posterior. And it's like they're talking to each other. It's like I have the fantasy that these are storylines, that one node is talking to another. How do you know they're talking? Because they're both active. If you look at telephone wires, the old-fashioned telephone wire, you could tell if two people were talking because both sides of the lines were active. So in storylines, they're really crucial, because that is a sign that the default mode network is active, and the other nodes are not particularly active. In fact, there's a reciprocal relationship. So when these storylines are going, people are going to, when they have their computer and you have them do tasks, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. There's going to be mental lapses. Do you ever have mental lapses? Yeah, it's because of your storylines. You're driving and you miss an exit. You're driving, where's the scenery? This is just to the storylines. Or, you don't hear what a client is telling you. Really hear what the client is telling, because you have a story about what he's going to say next. Yeah? So that's just a little bit to show you that, there is some neuroscience with what we're talking about. So that's a two-loop diagram that we discussed, and the central control is right in the middle here. This is where we're using thought, so mind work with thought. The central control is where all our interventions, the central controls are basically everything is directed to these little diamonds here. And what happens that you either are in one loop or the other. Either you're I system driven or it's natural functioning. So if you're writing an autobiography, you have all these self-centered thoughts, well, that's natural functioning. I mean, your job is to write an autobiography, so you want to have all these thoughts. But if you're driving down a freeway or operating heavy equipment or being a Major League Baseball player, you know, the analysis will give paralysis. So it just depends upon what you're doing. So, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So each moment, every single thing that you do, walking, talking, taking care of yourself and responsibilities, is one or the other. It's either natural functioning or I system driven. The only two choices, and this is sort of common sense, but we do have validity from the MRI studies. So when you're natural functioning, you resonate with the universal natural functioning, okay? That there's a resonance that takes place between you, the child in Syria, the terrorist organization, the people that are blowing other people up, that you're not disconnected from that. It isn't that those terrorists are outside of this net. They're inside this net. And the reason why we can't understand terrorists is because we say it's other. You see? They have the same choice, that same two-loop diagram. They're not, you could say, well, they're sick, they're demented, they're this and that. But the reason why we can't understand terrorists is because we don't include them in this. They may not be natural functioning, for sure they're not natural functioning, but whether they're natural functioning or not, you can't get away from existence, you can't get away from the net. So the I system functioning is that you're cut off. It cuts you off from all these other loops. And that's what characterized I system functioning, that basically you're preventing yourself from understanding how the world works and making interventions, okay? So reality is a unified structure created and held together by the net, and due to the pervading animating principle, the net functions seamlessly throughout space and time. So the net is more meta. It's the fundamental that creates everything, that's the root of everything. So, oh yeah, here's the overactive I system. So basically, when your I system is active, that your C loops, that's why we put in C loops, that your C loops are cut off. Obviously, that there's different degrees depending upon our representational world of how, but we sort of show how we're sort of isolated. And we're even isolated from our body, yeah? Yeah, when our I system is active, that the mind-body harmony and balance, mind-body unification is disrupted. It's like we're just all head. There's head floating around, but we do have a body. This is why one of the techniques that we have is come to your senses. So what this does is sort of isolate us as an individual, and there's a collective I system, which we're going to get into later on. And the collective I system isolates us from the other groups and isolates us in a social fashion. But we're talking about the individual identity system. So do we have any questions at this point? We've covered a lot of material, but so now we're looking at the root of injustice. We're looking at the root of racism. We're looking at the root of injustice. So, yeah.
You've mentioned how the ice system competes with the natural system. Why do we sort of naturally default to the ice system if we're not on task? Why don't we naturally default to the natural system?
Because if we...
And is this ice system a learned thing? Or is it... where does it come from?
Okay, the ice system is built into our DNA. The ice system is built into existence. The ice system is built into humanity. The reason why we just don't naturally default to natural functioning is because we're not angels. The angels have a natural default to be in harmony and balance with the net. So everyone, we have free choice, you see. Our mission is what we do with free choice. And that we have a blessing to be able each moment to do good or to do evil. I have a choice of taking this and throwing this as hard as I can in your face, you see. I have a choice. And that's a blessing that I have a choice. You see? But when we're connected to the net, we have all this input, all this connectivity. So basically, the way the mind works, it works dualistically. If there's good, there must be bad. If there's high, there must be low. This is how the dualistic mind works. And we'll get into duality and non-duality a little bit later. But we're made this particular way, and I think the Bible and the scriptures are very, very crystal clear about this. There's no question in any of the traditional spiritual traditions that we have a net, a hindrance, and it's very, very, very powerful, okay? If you want to understand human beings, they have an eye system. No matter how much you understand the brain of a dog or a cat or even a monkey, you're not going to understand this. They don't have an eye system. The eye system is embedded in every individual, in every group, that human endeavor, that is the bottom line. That this is part of the power of this eye system model, that every group can function in harmony and balance socially, or it can carry on terrorist activities. It can be a gang that wants to control the streets of Chicago. So the bottom line is we all have a identity system, and there are some spiritual masters who, when asked the question, for instance, the Dalai Lama, well, I love the Dalai Lama. Carol and I have seen the Dalai Lama when we were at Michigan. I have love for the Dalai Lama. They asked him a question: if there was a part of the brain that had to do with greed, hatred, and ignorance, what would you do with it? It would be possible. Would you be okay if we excise it? And he said, yes. According to this model that you can't get rid of that, you must acknowledge that this is part of what the I system bends you to do. So basically, you can't cut out the identity system. Our responsibility is what? To try to understand how it works, the requirements, what it does, and we'll get into later on about how that purifies who we are as human beings. Meaning, we can't mandate, those of you who do MBB, you can't mandate natural functioning, see? You rest the identity system and then it blossoms, just as those of you who do the two-part map. The wisdom, we're all connected to a wellspring of healing, goodness, and wisdom. I mean, that's power, beauty. That's just part of the net, which we're exploring, the underlying model of the mind. And as we'll see, that there's a tremendous power that comes with this understanding of it. Because as time goes on and we do the practices, we're purifying the representational world, and the accident of natural functioning will happen more and more and more. That basically, existence is a loop. Each moment, existence is calling. Each moment, the Heavenly Father is calling. Each moment, God is calling us. Each moment, our true self is calling us. And how are we going to close that loop? You see, if we naturally function, that loop is closed. The identity system, that loop can never be closed. The identity system is a dysfunctional system that no matter what the results are, no matter how negative the results are of the identity, it keeps going on and on and on and on. It just is a vicious cycle. It doesn't stop. The identity system wants to work. And just even you look at suicide. What is suicide? It's just a victory of the identity system, that the fixer kills a biological self. Suicide is a victory of the identity system. The identity system keeps going on and on. But good, we'll get in more, and that's a great question about the default setting. But I think there was another question.
So I was thinking about when you say animals don't have identity systems, and I'm thinking about like my dog. I pull a leash out and my dog has the perception that this means we're going to go for a walk. It creates its thoughts attached to me. And so I'm trying to understand identity system versus the difference of, as human beings, we have the ability to have consciousness of ourselves and to expand that consciousness. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yep. So the question is, does a dog have an identity system? The dog has a sort of enough of conception of the dog that it knows where its paws are, it recognizes the master. For instance, to give you an example, that one of our pets, we've had dogs all the time, but one of our pets had an infection of one of the legs, and went to the vet and says, well, we need to amputate. And I said, amputate? That's terrible. I mean, and he says, right after the amputation, the dog is fine. He thinks he just has 3 legs. Doesn't notice a bit of difference. Dog looks in the mirror. Woof, woof, woof. It doesn't recognize itself in the mirror. It doesn't have this ability to conceptualize itself, it doesn't have the informational handling capacity. It does things, it can learn things, you see, but it doesn't have an identity. So it basically, we'll get into this, it naturally functions. You know, if you look at wildlife, they natural function. They may choose this or they may choose that. You may have a deer and he may go this direction and then he turns around. I mean, he just, you know, it isn't that they're weighing all of this, that is just their sort of natural functioning. So the dogs, if we look at the loops, every loop in the dog is natural functioning, every loop. His connection to you, you know, you're the diamond, his connection to you, his connection to his body, all is natural functioning. That, you know, the dogs don't do what human beings do to each other. You know, there's predators and you know, there's a whole thing, everything, we'll get into that later, is sort of in harmony and balance. Nature is in balance, even though there's predators and there's, you know, using, you know, up the scales, using, you know, others for food, but there's no identity system. So thank you, that's a very good question, but basically when we get into the collective, it'll be a little more clear, but only human beings have an identity system. The dog, 100% of the time, is always connected, fully connected and expressing how it experiences all these activities. So there is, you know, the dog is related to different parts of his body, connected to you, connected to the environment, and it tries to, as natural functioning, to optimize what it is, and it has, you know, each step. So we'll get into that a little bit later. Other questions?
Yeah, I have one. Dr. Block, I guess I'm wondering, is part of the power of the eye system, in your opinion, related to survival? Like, we as humans, we have a unique capacity for symbols, right, that a dog doesn't have. And part of our, you know, eye system capturing things, you know, that are requirements, they're symbols, they're representations of the world, that we have a unique capacity that animals don't, and it's part of the reason we respond so strongly, that it's related to survival.
Okay, good. 100% of the time that our ability to survive, our adaptation, our relationships, 100% of the time, it's natural functioning. That the eye system tries to capture natural functionings and make believe, if it wasn't for my fixer, if I didn't drive myself, if I wasn't compassionate, if I wasn't a good person, then I'd go right down the tubes, you see. And that's a great myth that the identity system conveys upon us. So, you know, when you deal with businesses, people have strong fixes, and we call them super fixers, because the super fixer gets positive gratification from its activities. So how did I get through medical school? Well, I drove myself. My fixer was active all the time, but the reason I was successful is not because of my fixer, but because my natural functioning was able to be somewhat diluted and channeled by the eye system. So what patients, clients, people you deal with, they're going to be very, very concerned that if they rest their identity system, that they're going to go right down the tubes. That the identity system is who they think they are, and they're going to hold on to that sucker no matter what. You're going to try to rest their identity system, and they're going to fight like cats and dogs to hold on to it, because that's who they think they are. So, you know, that survival has nothing to do with identity system. Survival is totally dependent upon natural functioning, okay? The I system sort of interferes with natural functioning and may imitate it. However, you can always tell the difference between natural functioning and I system driven functioning. And how can you tell? Well, when your I system functioning, that you have body tension, mind clutter, that your awareness sort of contracts, that basically you're somehow having all these storylines that are totally centered on you and sort of more isolated. So it's a great question. A question that I always get is that, hey, doesn't my I system help me adapt? Well, it's all in natural functioning, it's all in our DNA, it's all in the interaction that the net has that allows us to adapt, that allows us to relate, that allows us to be social beings. So the I system sort of fools us, but yet it's so strong that we need to have a choice, you see? If we didn't have an I system, we'd just all be angels, or we would be a creature indistinguishable from other creatures. But what's in existence, that there's, you know, the trees, the sand, the dirt, the terrorist, everything exists at this particular moment, and existence couldn't take place without everything. And as part of the creation from the net, we have an I system. So it isn't the I system the I system is created by the net. However, I system functioning closes us off from experiencing and expressing the best of who we are. So that, I think, is a very sort of 20,000-foot view of the I system, that the I system isn't independent of the net, but the I system has created, the net has created the I system. Other questions, other thoughts?
Yes, Stan, hi. I would like to do a little demonstration, and everyone pick up their net of existence and give it to your neighbor. Just pass them around. Can I have yours? All right, put it on your little muffin tin. Okay, what's going on now? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Is it you? Where is your body tension? Where are you at with that? Okay, let's give it to somebody else. All right, are you finding yours? Here, Donald. Okay, where's your I system? Have you found yours? We can move them around again. Have you found that little child? Have you found yourself? It's somebody else's net of existence. Okay, let's find our own now. They're all unmarked. Can you find your own? Okay, find your own. There is our exercise. That's how your eye system works.
Thank you, Carolyn. It was Carolyn's idea to have balls in the first place, and I thank her, and I thank her for her wisdom. I'm just the front man here. Carolyn is the spirit of the team. So I guess what Carolyn was pointing out is, aren't you more comfortable with your own ball? Yeah, I think we all want our own ball. In fact, my parents were telling me this story. They passed away, but they were living in Maine, and there'd be snowbirds. In the summer, they'd go to Florida. And the only people in Florida at that time were the newlyweds and newly dead, nearly dead. So all you go into a restaurant, you hear everyone talking. All they're talking about is their physical illnesses. So my parents got together with a bunch of folks, and they wrote down their problems, with their body and everything else, their problems with their kids who didn't meet their expectations and what have you. So they wrote down all their problems, and then they threw them all in the middle of the table. And which problems do you think they ended up with when they had a choice? They all took their own problems back. So the eye system is really a powerhouse.
We have a question here.
Oh, questions?
I'll make it quick. To me, the way I understand the eye system is that it functions from fear. That it's
Excuse
fear.
me?
To me, the eye system functions from fear. That it's fear-based, and that innately, I think we have a fear of connecting to the net as you conceptualize it, which means we have even a fear of connecting to our true selves, which will follow connecting with others. So because all of that, the net is still an unknown, and we come into this world conditioned to function from the eye system, basically. So I think for me, it's fear.
Yes, well, part of the backbone of the eye system is fear. That basically it uses this human emotion that we call fear to convince you to hold on for dear life. That basically what's built in the default mode network and the salience network, they're partners, and what's built in is to grasp, to cling to who we are. And it uses fear, anxiety, joy, hope. It can use any particular emotion, not only fear, which is very, very powerful. And there's a structure in the brain, an insular network that has to do with body sensations and fear and so forth. And that's always lit up when the eye system is active. So you're absolutely right, fear. But the Adana system is very, very clever and can use any emotion to keep itself going. It can be the love of self. It can be the, which is a love of self, does come from the net, although the eye system can capture that and it becomes part of how the eye system works. But it's a very, very, very good point that it isn't just fear, that there's something above fear. And it's a structure of how humans are put together, part of the architecture of the net. And as we understand it, and really, this is ineffable, no one can understand this. But we're trying to simplify it so we have a model that will help ourselves live our best life and help humanity to to reach its ultimate destiny. So, fears, I think it's very, very, very powerful, and I think that, fear can be used objectively. If you, see, a big opening. If you're in Hawaii and you see a big opening in the big island, you see a big opening and steam is coming out of it, you just run like the Dickens. I mean, that's part of, fear too. It's sort of a built-in. So, Freud wrote Beyond the Pleasure Principle. So his model was that there's a death instinct, and that accounts for why people hate themselves or self-destructive. That was Freud's model. What we're saying is that there isn't any death instinct that's any different than other components of the human being, but we're saying that the I system accounts for individual and collective destructive activities. So when there's individual and collective destruction, that the I system is always behind it, just like in suicide. In fact, I studied with Carl Menninger years ago at the Menninger Foundation. And he made it very, very crystal clear that every single suicide is a homicide, that the fixer kills a biological self. It's a victory for the I system. So, the model helps us account for, a lot of things that why your clients struggle to heal, why they struggle to have better relationships, that their I system prevents the access to our wellspring of healing, goodness, power, and wisdom. And if we're not connected to the net, then our healing is impaired. It's like if you have a cut on your hand and you keep pouring salt on the wound or dirt on the wound, it will delay the healing or it may not heal. The I system is what prevents healing from both physical and emotional trauma. So with people who are subjected to very traumatic experiences in war or civilian life, what prevents them from healing is the I system. So if you rest the I system, then it will open up healing, and the I system is resting, then there's many, many other techniques that would be very, 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 very helpful. Let's see what else. So this is pretty much a repetition of what we said about the greed, hatred, and ignorance, and it pairs our access. And at times in our life, it may seem that this net is broken. It's sort of people word it in different ways. I've read it that, when things go wrong, why do bad things happen to good people? We feel that the higher power is sort of neglecting us. We get sick. We get cancer. So with the facts of the matter, and I think we can more embody it as we do MBB practices or other spiritual practices, that the net is never lacking and never broken, even though this is the experience that the I system would want us to have, that we're being abused, we're being picked on, we're being treated unfairly. As far as your net is concerned, that all that is how the net functions. And we'll certainly get into more of that this afternoon. But I wonder if we got a little time, if we could have some questions or thoughts about what this morning session has meant to you. What does it mean? Is it helpful? What does it do with your understanding of the mind or your relationship to clients? After all, you're getting CEU units here, so we need to focus on that some. That we're going to get into later on, the micro and the meso and the macro components.
Do you remember how you were talking about when we're relaxed, 60 to 80% of our blood flow is going to a certain part of our brain, and it takes us into this, as I'm thinking, it takes us down into the I system, our self-centered system. And yet at the same time, you're telling us that when we're relaxed, we're really connecting with the net. And I'm missing something.
When the I system is relaxed, we're always focused on the task at hand, which is take care of us and responsibilities, to deal with the urgent situations, to deal with work. And so natural functioning incorporates all these default modes, and basically they're all in harmony and balance. So each moment is harmony and balance. So basically, this representational world and how we relate to others, you get an accurate picture. We get as much input from our body and from our source as possible. So what it does when the I system is resting, we sometimes say, well, you have a ready, relaxed body and mind. A ready, relaxed body and mind means your I system is resting. You can't depict natural functioning. Natural functioning has no characterization. Natural functioning, we can characterize the I system. We can characterize maybe how a model works. But natural functioning is just the optimal functioning from the net each moment, just like the body sort of optimally functions. And if it's cold, we do one thing, it's hot, we do another. But basically, it isn't outcome dependent, just like this soldier, who rushes onto a grenade. It isn't he figures out, it's just natural functioning. This is what he does. So we'll get in more this afternoon, but natural functioning is not outcome dependent. That if we rest our identity system, then we sort of have access to natural functioning, which resonates with universal natural functioning, and our body, mind, and spirit are in harmony and balance. As to whether we say yes or no, it isn't a yes or no. Like there was a woman that was in therapy a while back, MBB therapy, and she was living with a her ex-husband, and they needed to live together, and they didn't get along. And he says, let's go for a walk together or something. And she would say, no, don't you understand this? And her blood pressure would go up, and she'd become tense. And then the whole evening she would mull over, how is he so stupid? Why doesn't he know better? But her whole body, she learned about MBB, and the guy, the husband or the ex-husband says, oh, why don't we go on a cruise together? And she put her hand on the table, felt the table, and she calmly says no. Both situations were no, okay? But they're totally different. There was a day and night experience. She just went on, spent the evening, talking with some of the kids and doing some other things. So it isn't outcome dependent. So, but we'll get into more of that, this afternoon and try to, clarify those questions. But basically, in this example of the woman with her ex, she just had access to her natural functioning, and she wasn't a victim, you see? The first time she victimized herself, the I system made her a victim. What he did was just make a comment, but it's like he had a connection to her body. Imagine that someone else is connected to your body that can turn up your blood pressure, that can close off your blood flow to your brain, you see? That basically she saw reality, that he didn't have that. And that this was just natural functioning, you see?
So I have a question on the loops, natural functioning and then the identity system functioning. In that double loop where you can see both on the image, I wonder if you can go to that. Where does the representational world fit into that? Like, where would you place that?
Okay,
I'm
good.
just trying to
Good.
conceptualize.
Where we place it is right where thoughts are, that we put thoughts here, because that's how the mind works. But looking at the model, right where thoughts are, you'd put a diamond. That's where the input. So basically, when you're talking to a client, you're talking to a client through this central control. That would be a central control here, and the representational world would be put in. So great. So basically, when you're thinking about something, that basically it all goes through this center, and we'll get into that more this afternoon, but basically that is the central control. And when you think about things, when you want to act, you basically input. Any therapeutic intervention always goes through this particular, right here, through this central control here, and we'll have some of those. So great, that's a question.
And follow up, so it can either be distorted, right, when it's through the I system loop, or a clear representation of the world and of your world.
No,
Is that what I'm
the
understanding?
representational world in the central control is what it is. That basically, if there's a lot of storylines, then it clouds up and it creates an aura and distorts the representational world. So basically, the representational world, because of the salience network, it's yelling that, hey, you shouldn't have done that, or I should do that, or whatever. So basically, this central control in here creates the requirements. That basically the central control is when we're having a conscious thought, it always goes through one of the central controls. And the central control isn't how we think, isn't awareness, isn't even consciousness, you see. All these things are regulated by the central control, which comes from the net. So whenever you have a thought, basically it's going into the central control, and your central control is, hey, my foot hurts, so you just move it, or hey, I thought of, I need to call somebody. That basically, it goes through this central control, and in the past, we've always put this, thoughts, because that's how it comes in, but now we're using a net, so but that's a very, 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 very important question, and we'll get into that later on. But basically, every thought that goes in, every sensory input, the whole environment, everything else, it comes from the central control. And there's more superior central controls in the net. This is why the concept, just like there's sort of a central control for the hand, and there's a central control for the brain, it's a central control for the mind. So when we think of something or we want to do something, that will and all these things are just sort of regulated by the central control. And the central control is colored by the eye system and contaminated by the eye system and tainted by the eye system. So then our activities more shoot up to the upper loop, and that when the eye system is resting, we will get into this afternoon, we still might have a lot of auras, but the eye system is resting and we sort of natural functioning. So the resting the eye system is part of it, recognizing the eye system, but then we'll get into this afternoon what happens in the mind as we continue to work with this, what happens in the representational world.